my man. How you doing?
Wrecker, my brother.
Yeah.
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I just came back from France where it was last week where we recorded, and now I'm back home, and I'm slowly getting into my sabbatical. It's not there yet. I'm doing the same thing as before, but I'm like I have a couple of revisions on my desk, and I'm like one after another, just sending them back out. And I reckon in March I'll be bored. And I'm looking forward to it. So my goal is not to be bored in February, but I'm hoping to be bored in March, and then do whatever I think is right, like go back to my agents and stuff like that.
Well, listen, I'll tell you something that I did recently. Uh, I'm working on this. You're familiar with this kind of qualitative meta-analysis that
Yeah,
I have
I'm your
done.
biggest fan now after I said in your lecture, which was a good lecture.
Yeah, which you sit in, which you read qualitative work, but you don't look at the theory that the qualitative work uses. You just look at its data, and then you
Yeah.
maybe try and reformulate it in a different way. So I'm working on this paper. And the paper is about how you can use these generative tools, these LLMs. I was working out with Hani, and we actually did that. So I had uh, whatever the Google product is, the Notebook LM, which is
Yeah.
actually a pretty nice design, right? It's one of those document-oriented rags, so it only is supposed to analyze the
The things that you
documents.
upload there, nothing else, right?
Yeah.
It just looks at the document that you give it to him. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to, and I'm as I'm working through kind of playing with it and trying to write this paper, I'm thinking, okay, at what point am I not doing scholarship, right?
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're analyzing secondhand things and you're using this rag and you're having and maybe it generates the idea. So Hani has these. He was using Golden Lock and Biddles like
Yeah.
ways to
The
to
contribution
prompt.
bit, the different,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I know that one.
and I mean, if you're interested, it's kind of interesting because when you just ask it to analyze, it comes up with lame stuff. When you ask it to give it a theory, it comes up with lame theories. However, if you prompt it in a certain way that involves theory generation, and you give it different tactics for theory generation, it sometimes is actually kind of surprising. So, as much as I want to be negative and I kind of want to be a generative AI hater, the fact is you can get it to do things that you maybe wouldn't have done without it, right? Which I've always kind of thought it just gives you the lowest common denominator. It always gives you a lame insight. You might be able to get it to do other things. So anyway, that's what our paper's about. But as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, okay, we are scholars. The thing we do is research. And part of, especially if you're generating theory, that's a creative act that's intensely personal. It's about humans, a human community, contributing to the human community. And it made me think, where's the line between, yes, good rigorous work and cheating,
Mm. So it's
you know?
cheating in the sense that, as you said, like theory construction is a human, is a creative, it's a social act,
Yeah.
and except that you're now using a tool to do some of that. And is that cheating? Is that the question?
Yeah, because this is what I think. We're professors. And you and I have talked about this in the past. You're a professor, you're supposed to know something. You
Yeah.
should be the worldwide expert in something, or at least be able to put you in front of executives and MBA students and undergraduates, and you
Or
know
as I
something.
say, like you should be able to be called upon at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night because someone read your paper and really wants to know an answer to a particular thing, like a decision, a policy making, whatever. And you'd better be able to get up there and give a good answer that these people can rely on.
Yeah. And if you don't know something, so for example, I might know something because I've been teaching and doing research in the area of system implementation, system development, and kind of online strategy type issues, right? I've taught
Yeah.
about that,
And
taught
open
at different
source,
levels.
right? Open source
Yeah, well, that's what I
coordination, some
system
stuff.
development. Open
Yeah, fair
source is
enough.
one
Yeah,
of
good, good, good. Yep, catch up.
so there are some domains where you could just throw me. I know the stuff. I've been doing it for decades. I can tell you current and old and whatever. Uh, if, however, I start using LLMs for my lit reviews, I start using LLMs for my thinking. Uh, I don't know, help with my writing. Who am I? I'm an LLM operator. I'm not a professor that knows my material, right?
Let's circle back to this. I'm gonna give you something that I've recently done and how I thought about it, and you, like, because I think it goes in the same direction. You tell me whether I've been cheating. So this is a situation. This is not an empirical piece where, like nothing like you, but CIS has a 50th anniversary, and they asked the previous editors-in-chief to write a commentary, a reflection or something, right? Like, hey, where's the journal come from and where's it going and whatnot. So I had in my head, like, this is just me recounting this. So I was like, all right, let's go look back, look forward, think about where it should change and where it should do the same thing, like instability and change, backward and forward. That was my idea for my commentary. It's not brilliant, it's just like, but it's simple, right? So all right, let's see, what do I think it should keep on doing, keep on being stable, and where do I think it should change? And I came up with a few ideas, and I wrote the first couple of pages of my commentary. And the commentary is only like 10 pages long to begin with in the first place. So I had about, let's say, 5 or 6. And I was like, well, and this is just me by myself, right? This is like, there's no one else, there's no co-author, there's no social interaction with anyone. I was like, well, it would help me if I can bounce some ideas off. So I opened ChatGPT 5.2 Thinking or Pro, one of the two. I was like, look, this is what I'm doing. And I'm writing this, and here's my idea. What do you think? And it said, well, first of all, it was being very nice. And like, don't be nice, be critical, etc. And what do you think about my stability and change and backward and forward argument, right? And then it interacted with me, and it brought up a couple of arguments. For example, there's one argument it made about how important it is how easy it is to break a reputation and how difficult it is to build a reputation, right? Building a reputation,
which we all know, right?
It's, but I didn't
very
think,
obvious.
Like,
but you didn't think it.
That's a good point. I didn't come up with this, but that's a really good point. So I took that point, like, which is like half a sentence, and I took that point and I worked it into the article somewhere. So did I cheat? So hang on, so I did this and iterated and wrote my paper, because to this point I don't think it writes as well as I do. Anyway, so I wrote it, but this was a point that it suggested, and I sort of worked with this. Anyway, so in the very end of this article, which is now online, there's actually like an acknowledgement or a footnote or an appendix or something where I said, look, here's how I used ChatGPT, and not like I used ChatGPT to refine my writing. No, here's what I did, and here's the prompts I used, and so forth. So I tried to say, like, well, given that I've just done that, let's just be very transparent and honest. So I say, like we talked about this, I saved the entire interaction dialogue, the prompts and the interim, everything. I saved all of that. And I put in several of the specific prompts that I used at various stages with ChatGPT. When I said, like, look, I interacted with ChatGPT as I was writing this article. Now, I wrote the article myself. Yeah, anyway, so did I cheat? Is that cheating or is that not? Because I don't think it is.
So what you're doing, and I would say if you just Googled and had some ideas, then you wouldn't be worried about this. It's only that you use the LLM that you're. So we're in the Wild West of these LLMs and using them in the research endeavor. So as far as I'm concerned, exactly what you did, I don't think you cheated.
I don't think you cheated either, to be honest.
I think because you're following our rules, which is just document the heck out of what you're doing and
be transparent about
really,
it,
really honest,
and
right?
Forthcoming. Yep.
Yeah, but I do think you're cutting corners at one point if you're not thinking or knowing what you're doing, and you're letting it do it. So, for example, if you do the writing and ChatGPT edits your writing and makes it sound better, there's no problem. There is a problem if ChatGPT is doing the writing, right? If ChatGPT is doing your thinking for you and you just blindly take what it did and use that as your idea, that's different than using ChatGPT or whatever as a thinking aid, where you're doing the thinking, you're reading the papers, right? If you're having it give you papers, and let's say it's getting past the hallucinations, which I thought it was kind of beyond that, and no, it's still you still get the hallucinations. So if it's getting you're reading the papers, right? So I think that's the number one thing we have as academics, especially in this really turbulent moment, is we just have to be trace what we did really well and document it and be transparent about it. So if we do that, I think right now we just got to kind of negotiate it out with each other.
I think in a way it goes back to some fundamental scientific principles, right? Like traceability, reproducibility, honesty, right? Like these are some like very core. It doesn't matter which method you choose, but it all comes down to these basic assumptions. And if you go by them, nowhere in there does it say you have to do everything manually. Because if that were the case, then you can't use Google, you can't use a literature management tool, you can't
use SPSS.
MaxQDA, you can't use MaxQDA because it would also tell you, hey, this code is used beforehand, right? So that doesn't make any sense. But of course, it needs to be. You need to be honest. You still need to be traceable, reproducible, and you still need to, I don't know what the right word is, you still need to check and protect against biases. Now, the difference might be that it usually used to be human biases. That's why we have intercoder reliability and all these sorts of things. And, the experimenter is not the guy who came up with the hypothesis and these sorts of things. But it's the same principle that would apply to an AI, right? So, like, it has a different form of bias. You need to protect against that. So we know it tends to hallucinate, or it could hallucinate. How do you protect yourself against that? So as long as you're doing any of these things,
or bias on its training
exactly
data.
Right, and as long as you can tick the boxes. By the way, you still need to you need to work within the bounds of your ethical clearance. That was always the case. So, for example, the ethical clearance didn't tell you that someone else could look at the data. Well, then you can't upload it to GPT either, right? These sorts of things. So, as long as you're sticking to these principles, then within these bounds, why shouldn't you use that?
Well, we've talked about what you should do, and that's what you're doing, is talking about the principles. So now let's flip it. How can you cheat? Like, let's say I was an unethical person. How could I cheat with ChatGPT? Well, I could have it write my paper for me. I could have it do my lit review for me, and so I think if you're going to include
data analysis, I think that's more often like here, and I think that's happening quite a lot. Like, here's some survey data. It may or may not be real. And here's a bunch of survey responses. Here's an SEM. Boof.
So having to do your analysis is unethical? How's that cheating?
Well, if you just have it do it for you and you don't check for hallucinations, you don't verify, etc., and so forth, rerun the analysis manually, for example, which is normally what you would do anyway. Like, you'd run it and you run it again and you flip a few things, etc. But if let's say you just like, because in a paper you wouldn't see that, right? In the paper would say, like, here 2017 responses from Prolific. Who knows whether they're from Prolific? Who knows whether they are bots on Prolific, whatever.
Well, that's making up data. All right. So clearly, one of the ways to cheat is to make up data, and people do that with LLMs, without LLMs. There are people with very prolific research careers.
Yeah, that is happening, and it has nothing to do with the LLMs. If at all, it makes it a little bit easier, or not, as a case may be. But that has happened in the past and still continues to this day. And we all get these papers. Like, I don't get them a lot, but I get them probably every year, I'd say, with let's just say very unclear provenance of data origins.
Because you could clearly send it, give me some realistic looking data on this topic. See, this is the problem. What's happened is the journal publications, the measure of good scholarship has become the goal. So people can have careers faking data. And, you could conceivably generate a whole bunch of data for a paper, say, give me some realistic looking data. You put it in the paper, the reviewers will let you in. And then you do that a few times, you could have a career.
Sure, in the long run, maybe even the medium run. I very much believe in the self-correcting nature of the system. It's one of the few self-correcting systems we still have, but it works. It works on the journal level. We talked about this. It works on the individual level. Make no mistakes. Like, people that have done this, people that have gamed the citation, people that have created fake data, got a few papers out of this. Yeah, sure. And we've been around long enough to see some people do this. And what became of these people 10, 20 years ago? Most of them are gone.
And there are people who have had tremendous careers, and then what happens is others start learning. Oh, then doctoral students won't work with them. And then, there are people who are well-known for faking their data, and it took a decade or so.
It takes a decade. It's a self-correcting. It works. It's very slow, but it does work. And 10, 15 years later, what I'm noticing is these people slowly, surely, there's not a big hurrah and a big blowout. They quietly disappear, like the PhD student that never finishes. There's not a big escalation happening. They very quietly disappear, and I think that
Yeah.
happens to certain individuals. Sure, they have 10 good years in between and whatnot, and to maybe some of them they made their living or whatever. But I do think in the long run, this always plays out. I mean, and there's some very public case like Francesca G, like doesn't
Yeah.
look too good being her, and Daniel Ariely the same way. Like look 10 years ahead. I don't think it's too difficult to imagine what happens to them. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
gone. It's done.
So the other thing, and except for there's that one, what was his name? The German, the Lichtenthaler, who wrote
Lichtenthal.
beautifully. Yeah, he's actually a professor somewhere.
Well, he's a professor at a private school, but he in the academic, especially in the research, he's gone. Like he hasn't done anything for the last 10 years, and he probably will never will again. He maybe even try and it never get through, whatever. But he still exists and he still makes a living, sure. But
So
he's like the system works still, even in
So the
his.
faking data is one big way that people cheat. The other one is the quid pro quo, where they kind of handle each other's papers. You hear of like these online groups that where they communicate with each other, and so that's another thing where for a while it works, it clearly works, but then other people get onto it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big story, of course, of the last half year or whatever, with the whistleblowing
Yeah.
and some of the
Yeah.
conflict of interest and collusion rings. We have an episode on that as well. But yeah, so and whatever else comes of this case, but clearly it pinpointed a few people, and everyone knows them now. So that too is happening, and there is a lot more attention to potential conflict of interest and perceived conflict of interest, and all the journals have reacted, all of them, quite quickly. So
Yeah.
again, the system is self-correcting, and it kind of works in that sense. Yeah.
All right, so two ways to cheat. Fake your data. Well, all right, first way to cheat is use LLMs to do the work you should be doing without being honest about it, right? Second way of cheating, fake your data. Third way of cheating, collusion with editors, reviewers somehow
Well,
or
fourth one is
something.
obviously automate your writing. Like have it right, like do the work, but then chuck it all in elements and produce a paper. I mean, this is happening. It happens in student essays. I don't know about you, but we tend to see that that students just their essay papers or whatever. They're I don't know how much, but most of that is clearly written by AI. It's not a good strategy if you ask me. It's because it's not good writing that comes out of it.
All right, what if I found like I have a data set and it's a cool like it kind of looks like a field experiment. So something changes and that thing that changes, I think it'll have an effect or it may have an effect. So and it's designed nicely so that it's, across some platform and I get the data and then I start digging through it a bit, see some significant correlations and then kind of reverse engineer some hypotheses to support those correlations
So
and then make a
harking,
paper that way.
harking based on patterns you discovered.
Yeah, we call it harking, hypothesizing after results are known,
Yeah,
or
harking.
sometimes people call it p hacking when you're just looking and trying to find significant
Yeah, I
relationships
think
and
like in the
reverse engineer.
neuroscience, p-hacking is the idea that you twist your statistical tests until you get a significant results. For example, like if you reduce the information in a particular metric, say you take a continuous variable and you put it into an ordinal or like an ordinal like 5 categories into binary, high and low, whatever. Because in any of these sense, as soon as you lose information, you increase the contrast, and then your statistical test, if it's 0.06, you might just tweak it into
Hmm.
0.05 or 0.004. I think that's p hacking. I think that's a
Okay.
little bit distinct from the I'm sifting through my data, find a bunch of asterisks, and then come up with a hypothesis after the fact, like hypothesis after the
Hmm.
results are known. Um, like here's a I think p hacking is a lot worse than harking. Would you agree?
Okay. I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I think they're both bad because neither one is honest. In a sense. They're both sort of honest because the harking, you could be like, well, I did this field study and I kind of knew it was a common sense hypothesis that I later structured. Same with p hacking. It's like, well, zero point zero 0.05 is kind of an arbitrary threshold. So if I get rid of some outliers and do whatever, massage the data a bit and just get it there for public, I think you can justify both if you from a certain perspective
I'd say so.
as acceptable, but I think the bottom line is they're both lies.
Well,
outright.
th- are they though? I mean, like, so I'm thinking about a project that we're doing at the moment. I'm doing it with a PhD student of mine, and we're looking at patent data. And these data sets are very large. There's a couple of million patents. Like, we look only at digital patents, right? Because I ask people. Anyway, still a couple of million patents produced by the SAP 500 firms. That's a typical data set, and then we have some other variables, etc. So you look at the data, and you test some of the independent and dependent variables that you come up with, right? So you have an idea, and then you operationalize these as variables, say patent counts or patent average or whatever, right? So you compute some metrics, and then you run your regressions. Now, the reality is that what you're looking for central tendencies. You're looking like, hey, it kind of looks like this is what we expected. I don't know, citation count goes up or whatever. Yeah, but not quite. But then the issue is, it's not that we're harking or p-hacking. It's really just there's a lot of freedom, like these degrees of freedom in how you operationalize the thing conceptually that you're interested in. Say, quality of a patent. Now I can measure that in 27 different ways. I can operationalize it in many, many different ways into an actual number that appears in my big data set. And of course I need to try out a little bit to see which of them is the best way that makes sense and gives us results. All of them kind of look the same, but some of them are literally, statistically speaking, stronger. Now, am I p-hacking?
Well, yeah, if you only selectively report the ones that make it stronger. So there are these tables that you can, and they're starting to get trend where you show, given all the different models, what the effects are, and you can do this with like all the robustness checks you might do as well. So I think, yeah, the problem is, and this is the cherry picking idea. And there's a paper. I'll tell you what it is, and then you can throw it in the show notes or whatever. But it talks about a lot of these dysfunctions. But cherry picking is just that you ran 6 analyses, and you only published the 1 or 2 that's, you don't publish the 4 that were not.
But the reality is also, like, the way that we report these types of studies, you can't just cherry pick one metric and run it and publish it. No one will accept that. Everyone will, first of all of them will probably say, give me, if not the correlation table, give me the entire data set. I want to rerun the analysis. Management Science does that. ISR does that, I think, as well. Many other journals, not all of them do that. So they rerun the thing. Second, no one is gonna accept a single one operationalization of your dependent variable. They all want to see at least 3. So they want to, or whatever, right? So even if you have one, they will ask you to do robustness check with alternative operationalizations, to the point that before we write the paper and submit it, we will do that ourselves. Like, we will at least offer you.
So
3
it's hard. So you answered.
ones.
You answered your own question. You can't get away with that, right? The cherry picking. Now, I'll tell you one place where you can get away with cherry picking, and it's unethical, is qualitative work.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
So I think, and you see this quite a bit, which I'm not sure how I stand. I mean, what do you think about this? I get a data set, I have ideas, and then I want to contribute to some conversation. So I didn't really thoroughly like go through Goya and do all that. I actually just grabbed the stories that fit the story that I want to tell, that gives back to the conversation. Is that cheating? Because if you think about it, I always say that if I make a theoretical contribution, I don't need data. So if I have some data and I make, like, if the theory is a proposition, it's on the back end, and I use some data, even if I cherry picked it to support my propositions, is that acceptable, or is that cheating somehow? Like, if I didn't show my whole data set or systematically analyze my data.
The way that would deal with this, and I've been in these situations, is that we very consciously decide, are we going to write an empirical paper or a theoretical paper? So, for example, like what now became an AMR, effectively, the very beginning, this is based on data that we collected. But it wasn't very strong data. It wasn't a lot of data. And as an empirical, qualitative, inductive theory, like, it would never fly because it's not good enough. But the insights were there. Right, so we saw it, like, we knew and we believed in it, and we started theorizing around it. But we said, like, we write a theoretical paper, because then, like, we're not even relying on weak data. We need to be able to convince reviewers and make the argument so plausible and so, like, so strong that people will just buy the argument without data. So it's tough, obviously. but you do have some confidence because you've seen it, and you can little bits and pieces. You can find nice examples, like little illustrations in the paper to support a logical argument. So in that sense, I don't think that's cheating. I think what's happening more often is that people are really like lazy in qualitative rigor, and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I want to say. Oh, I need that data structure. And what I see very often is that they give you it looks like an excerpt. Like they have the concepts, sure, but if you look at the data structure from the right to the left, you see like one code. There's like 4 concepts and maybe 20 open codes, and that's what their open coding stage is. Now, anyone that done open coding knows you generate like 500 of these goddamn things. Yeah, like thousands sometimes.
Well, the first round, and then you do
but
rounds.
If you start like this is the first round, and I came up with 12. And then I've abstracted 12 to 4 processes. What? No, that looks like cheating to me. Like that looks to me like you haven't actually done 3 rounds of coding. That's what it looks like. That looks like cheating to me.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where so if you look at Wanda Orlikowski's work throughout her career, a lot of it was theory generating work, where she did do some field work and then kind of uses the field work as an illustration. Yeah. She doesn't claim she's
not an empiricist, right? No,
yeah, she is, but she doesn't frame a lot of her work that way. The work that she kind of frames it as, okay, here are some illustrations, or I don't know. I guess that's it. But here's the thing: if you do qualitative work and you call it an illustration, people will just kill you. The reviewers, they want to see the Goya, they want to see some.
That's
method,
what I mean. Like that's why I think I would make it a conscious decision. Are you writing a theoretical piece with some empirical illustrations in it? Then you better not have a method section and whatnot, because then you get thrown into the empirical bucket, and then people will kill you for rigor. Right. Yeah. So I think that's one way of dealing with it. That you sometimes like, well, look, we are trying to publish theoretical pieces, and this is doable. And then every now and then you have a couple of different ways of bringing empirics into this. Right. You can have little vignettes or whatever. It just is illustrations. It's again, you need to write very carefully around it. But that's the way to go. It's better than, I think, working with weak data or weak analysis of data to support your theory. I think that's not a good idea.
So, all right. So this is what we decided for qualitative. If you're doing an empirical paper, you do a rigorous process. You don't cherry pick, and you fully show what you actually did. However, if you're doing a theory paper and using qualitative, call it an illustration, and then make sure you're honest there. But all right, I have another ethical question for you.
No, wait. Can I go back to the p-hacking and Harking real quick before we put that aside?
Sure.
Because I would have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure I recently saw an analysis of some journals in business and management that about 10 years ago, when this entire questionable practice, p-hacking and Harking, came up. This is about 10 years old. They invented, they started policies saying, like, you can't do that, you can't do this, and we find that you get rejected or whatever. And I'm very sure, and I will look this up, but as far as I remember, there are now sort of science of science studies that looked at, all right, these policy changes, preventing p-hacking and Harking, what has it done? You know what it has done? Nothing, not much. Nothing. Like, for example, the distribution of p-values, there are these interesting graphs from about 10 years ago that show like, oh, there's this unusual spike around 0.005, right? Yeah. It's not like it goes like down and then whoop, goes up again. Yeah. They still exist, like irrespective of whether you had such a policy. Some of the other ones as well, like there's this faithful p-value reporting, so don't use thresholds, not just give us the p-value and stuff like this. Some of the stats guidelines, it looks like they haven't really changed much, which goes to suggest, I think, to me, my interpretation of that is the issue that may exist with p-hacking and Harking has how they can be used for cheating purposes, probably just marginal to begin with. Because as we discussed a couple of times, there are instances where that is what you do, and there are instances where that is kind of like cheating, and it depends a little bit how you write about it and how honest you are in what you've done and how you report it. But in certain traditions, you will do, like in pattern discovery, you are effectively p-hacking in a way. Like,
but we are
hypothesizing after we've known something.
But as long as you do that, as long as you set up your paper that way, it's ethical. If you set up your paper as a hypothesis test, it's unethical.
That's pretty the point, but it's more an issue of the reporting and less of the doing.
Right.
right? So
Right.
that's why some of these policies seem to have such a big effect, because not only applies to how we write papers and how we, like set them up and what the scripts are, and not so much how research actually unfolds. So if we go around saying you can never hypothesize after you've seen something, I mean, that's, you wouldn't tell that to anyone. Like, go have a look and make sense of what you see. Of course, we still need to do that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I think you and I are on the same page there. But I think the issue is not with the doing of it. The issue is with the reporting in a way that's right. All right. So I have some other kind of softer, or maybe they're not softer, ethical issues. But to pivot over to the review process,
Hmm.
what if you're an editor
Hmm.
and you get a revision and or a submission, whatever, and it's flawed, but you see, oh, here's this senior person that I respect and admire. That's third author.
Yeah.
They can handle it. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them a path to publication. And in your head, as an editor, you have that train of thought that it
Yeah.
would probably be a rejection, but because this person, I know they're good, I might give this author team a chance. Is that unethical?
I think some people would construe that as this part of this collusion and elite and brotherhood and, people giving each other the papers, etc., etc. I don't think it's quite as drastic as that.
Reciprocity would be like if the person let my paper in, therefore I'm letting their paper in.
Yeah, but
That's clearly unethical. But
but in
that's
an
not the question
implicit
I asked.
way. I mean, like, but even yeah, I get that. Okay, so it's not reciprocal per se. So
No, it's not reciprocity. This person has never handled my, I just know their work. And I'm like, this person's very good. So I would maybe normally reject, but
so I
since
will, I
that
will, I
person
will
is,
answer this. So I've had these instances and where I've had that thought in my mind, and I'm like, oh look, there is some very established, not established, but very senior person that has, pulled off several good papers, and it makes me think, oh, they know how to handle a tough, risky revision, right? Because they just have that experience. Now, and that makes me think, well, if they're on board on the team, they can help them. So in that case, I should give them the benefit of the doubt. Having said that, so that crosses my mind as well. Having said that, if it is a borderline risky revision where it's unclear whether it can be pulled off, you know what my default stance is all the time? All the
hmm,
time,
what?
irrespective of who the authors are. In such a case, I never want to be the one that says you can or cannot do that. That should be
No,
the author's choice. So,
yeah.
so that's my philosophical stance anyway in editorial decision. Like if it's
Yeah.
borderline, I'm
You're
always
telling
going
me
to do
about
the author.
yourself and you never answered my question.
Hang on. But let me just say, like the downside of my strategy is I'm running into a situation where I have to late stage reject paper that I should have rejected earlier.
Yeah.
That's the type
You
two
give them,
error.
you base, what you're saying is you give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
I give
If
everyone
it's
the
a
benefit of
junior
the doubt,
person,
and I
if
want to
it's a
be very
senior
clear in
person.
saying that that is not necessarily a very good strategy because it can lead to heartbreak later on, which is even more painful for everyone involved. Like,
Yeah.
right? So that's the downside. I still do that because I
Yeah.
think that's how I make that decision at that point. But it's not better than
So,
anything
all
else.
right.
Just
All
a
right. So you
different
told us what you
approach.
do, and I probably have a little different approach because with me, if it's interesting, I try to give them a benefit of the doubt. I don't care if they're a junior person that's never published a paper or the most senior person I know. I don't give and if it's not interesting, I just reject it, and I'm not going to give it. But I actually don't buy if a senior person's on the paper. I oftentimes think that that senior person might not be doing anything on the
So in
paper,
other words,
especially.
they should have picked up on that already.
Yeah, it's like, why is this in my lap with this mess if that senior person is paying attention to this paper? So I try to, and I'm sure I'm biased. We're all biased, right? We're
You're all
human,
biased, of
but
course.
I try my best to be like blind to if there's a senior person on it. I've had papers with two senior people on it that I just thought this shouldn't have been submitted, and then I rejected. So to me, it's less about the authors, it's more about the idea. And then if I like the idea, I don't care who it is, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and try and shape it. If I'm not thrilled about the idea or I think there's some big flaw, the two big reasons I reject. Number one, there's really nothing new. They're just basically saying shit that's been said over and over again. They just haven't read the work that has already said it over and over again. So it's like, I can't do anything with you. Write a new paper. That's one. The other big reason I reject is The front end is just very vague, dismisses the literature. Then they have this middle, and then they have this back end, and it's just like not integrated.
Yeah,
And
none
then
of
you
that
tell
fits
them to go
together.
do
Yeah,
it, and then you tell them to go integrate and set up there, and then what do? The same thing all over again. And you get 2 rounds of that. You just have to reject. And then the third big reason I reject is something about the data doesn't work. Their experiment just has a critical flaw, and I don't
yeah.
want them to run another
Like
one.
the research
They're
design that someone has just is
yeah,
not able to answer the question that you're asking.
exactly.
For example,
100%.
cross-sectional versus longitudinal question, cross-sectional design. How the hell you can't? It's impossible. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But if they have a
Anyways,
cool data set and a cool idea of some sort, I don't care who they are. I'll give them a shot. But that wasn't my question. My question was
is it
not
cheap?
you or me. If there's another person, and that other person takes into consideration that, oh, this is a senior person, they'll probably be able to handle it. I'm going to ask him to do some X, Y, Z. Is that thought process on the part of the editor? Is that being unethical, or is that just being human, or is that actually a good editorial practice? Right?
I think it's a dumb strategy. It's not very realistic because if there's a senior person at number 3 or 4 of the author team, let's face it, they're not the guy. They're not the people pulling off the work. So going by, oh, there's a senior person here as the 4th author, that means they can pull off the revision. That's just stupid. Like that's not how it works. The question is, right? So I don't even think that happens too
So
often.
it's stupid, but is it ethical?
I don't think it's very ethical. I'm not sure it's outright unethical, but it doesn't sound very ethical to me to give someone just because there's a name on the person. You know what? It sounds to me like you being scared of rejecting a known person. That's what it sounds like, and
And
thereby
that's kind of the
it's unethical.
yeah.
And does that happen? Yeah, sure. I think it does happen. Like in the sense that there's a little bit of a star bonus that that seniority or that name gives you some revision opportunities that other people wouldn't have gotten. Sure. I believe that. Yeah, I believe that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, if there's any sort of collusion, that's outright. And we as editors have to because we're such a small field, there will be people that you've interacted with in various ways, and we just have to do our best to be objective. In the sense that, hey, if this is great research,
It goes back
this is
also
not
to
great
honesty and maybe even more honest or more transparent reporting. Like saying, so for example, like a lot of the EIC interactions that I now have as SE is, hey, you give me this paper just so you're aware. I've been on this panel with this person like in 2017. We've been faculty mentors at this DC. Whenever in Korea, so like just so you know, this is my history with these authors or one of the authors, and now you tell me whether I can handle the paper or not. So that's like what at the moment that's what most of the interactions is, which means if every SEs like that's a lot of interactions the EIC has with their SEs, but that's what I see happening. And then you come to a conclusion saying you handle this paper or it's too close to comfort, poof, and then I think that's fine, and then you deal with it. As
I have noticed that
and openly as you can.
Yeah, before I kind of left MISQ here, I did notice that for the last 6 months there was this frenzy of activity where people are like, "Oh,
yeah." Like as far as I can see, every paper assignment by Sue now involves at least 5 to and fro, because there's some history somewhere there, and then some of them then get rerouted, and I think authors will be able to see this because you see that you have an SE assigned, and then a day later you check back, it might be a different SE, and I think what happened in the meantime is because when you get that email, you automatically have the paper already in your account, and then you have a couple of twos and fros, which has a couple of implications. Like number one, it'll take all of that takes longer now. Because the SE and EIC have that conversation, you have the same conversation with the AE. As far as I can tell, the SEA have the same conversation with picking reviewers. So everyone is very conscious about COIs at the moment.
Another.
Yeah.
All right, good. Another ethical issue.
Oh boy, you have a lot of them.
You're a senior person at University of Hamburg, well known. You know what? You have a bunch of junior people in your lab. You put your name on that junior person's paper. They're doing something. Well, you're in my lab. I hired you. That might be one way, like you put your name, you're a senior person. Another way is junior people. They start off, they're part of a team, someone else is taking the lead, they get their name on, and they don't really do much. So, is getting a publication when you really didn't do much unethical?
Yeah.
I think it is. So, the question is, what is much?
Well,
What do you think constitutes actual authorship versus not? Like, when are you being unethical putting your name on a
Well,
paper?
first of all, if you're the lab supervisor, if you're the chair of the department or anything like that, and that is the sole reason you put your name on the paper, that's just outright unethical. It even violates all sorts of, at least in Germany, it violates national research conduct laws. Like you can
Okay.
literally look that up. That is not if you're the person that
So
acquired
wait,
the
so you're
project
my
fund.
postdoc. You're my postdoc. I hired you. I gave you access to this company, this German company in
Would like
Hamburg.
no, it wouldn't be enough.
And then I send you in there. So I've hired you, I pay you, you're my postdoc money. I gave you access to the German company, and then you go off and let's say you're my postdoc, but you're doing work with say Jan Mendling or something,
I
right?
reckon it gives you a footnote, my friend. That is not an intellectual. None of these things
I
that
don't
you
get
mentioned.
I don't get
No,
on the paper. I hook
no,
you up with Jan Mendling. You and Jan Mendling write the paper. Don't I get third
no.
author?
You're not, that
Really?
none of these things. They're important enablers. Don't get me wrong, but none of them is an intellectual contribution. And that is I know that like in some institution this is still practice and the norm, but the regulations, the actual law, they're very crystal clear. None of these things that you talked about is giving you right for of co-authorship. None of
So
them.
what is co-authorship? So what do I need to do to be like, let's say I'm that junior person. I show up for every single meeting. I am enthusiastic about the research project. I show up for all the meetings and I edit the paper. And I've added a few citations each round. I've added some citations, helped with the tables, and I just show up. Now, the senior person and the lead author are probably doing all the thinking, and the lead author did the data collection. But I'm part of the team.
You're
Can I add
participating.
myself to that paper?
No. Well,
So what
I
do I do?
think
Take myself off?
well, yeah, duh. I like, yeah. I mean, like we talked about this in other episodes, but like, first of all, participation in activity is not the same as contributing to an activity. And for example, like contributing to writing means writing, not,
Yeah.
not. You're the guy that puts the references in APA format. That's not, that's not writing. And
Yeah.
then fixing commas and stuff like that, or leaving a comment on the side is not writing. It's participating in meeting. It's not the same as contributing to the idea development. Like
Right.
for that, you need to say something at the very least, right? So just being in a meeting all the time, being always there doesn't help, and taking notes doesn't necessarily help. Anyway, so this is where it gets, I guess, into the gray zone a little bit, and there can be some leeway, I suppose, in interpretation. But by and large, if you haven't done anything, if you haven't actively contributed to the writing, to the analysis, meaning like you've coded or you wrote the code for the SPSS script or something, and you haven't written freaking half a page, you have no business being on a paper. And even if it's like a sentence here and there, if you think about a paper having 50 pages and 15,000 words, and you've written 4 of them, that's pretty marginal, don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
given that there's space for 3 authors by 15,000 is something in the vicinity of 5,000. Now, I'm not saying you need to write all the time. I'm in plenty of situations where, like, someone is doing most of the writing for because one voice and better writing and whatnot. There's multiple ways to contribute, but contribute you have to.
And I think it matters whether you're junior or senior, and only in this situation. The one senior is what we just talked about, where they don't know what's going on and they put their name on it. That's awful. The other senior, I have my PhD student, Ryan, and he's collecting the data. He's right, but I have to teach him how to write. So I'm meeting with him. I get the revisions. I give him feedback on it, but he's got to do the writing. Now, when he submits this paper, I'm going to be on it. I've spent countless hours reading his stuff, putting it in there. Uh, right. And maybe I didn't write much in the end, or maybe I just did some editing. But I think that idea of intimate, continuous iteration with someone as a senior person, even if in the end you're writing, you didn't generate, a third of the words or whatever.
I mean, it
Right?
gets
I think
very
that,
it gets very complicated because um, like first of all, it changes with time. Like you may not
Yeah.
write much now. You might write the bulk of the revision. That's I see this happening a lot. Whoever writes the first draft isn't always necessarily the person that drives around 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, that's true.
Like for example, I sometimes like I know exactly how we should respond to this. How we resign. Let me do it.
Yeah.
And I'm third author or whatever, but I know how to handle the revisions better because of experience. So that happens. Number one. Number two, the other point, especially with the junior, like Ryan or someone, they need to write their own papers. Like they need to write.
They need to learn.
And you need to learn. If I tell my PhD students, not the postdoc but PhD, look, you need to write a 150 page, 200 page thesis. You've never done this in your life. You better start writing because I'm not writing your PhD thesis. Even if we work on the papers, that PDF document that you end up submitting, that's got to be yours. And I'm telling you, if you've never written until you write that 150-page document, you will struggle. So learn to write, and frankly, you do that by writing.
All right, so we just scattered across a whole bunch of different ways of cheating. I'm sure there are more. If people want to let us know what we missed, what types of cheating we missed, I'd be really curious. I'm sure we missed a ton.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there are a lot of ways to cheat. The thing that inspired me thinking about this is that I was listening to Freakonomics this morning on the way home from the gym, and they were talking about the cheating in the Tour de France, with Lance Armstrong. His one guy's on there, so it's a good podcast. You should listen to it, Ricker.
Yeah, I will. I shall do that actually when I go for a run later today. But hey, one more thing, because we gave ourselves some homework last time when we talked about the definite new journal ranking, and we created a little matrix with criteria and whatever. So people, like, I've done my homework, and I hope Nick, you've done your own individual ranking.
You and we're not going to do it individual. We're going to do it together. So I'm going to look at yours. We're going to negotiate, adjust it, and we will have a ranking.
We will have a ranking. We will talk about this. We are not quite there yet. We might have a surprise guest joining us for that. Anyway, we are on it, and some of us have done their homework already. So keep on listening. We'll be back as usual, and then we'll give you the definite guide. Like I have mine, and I'm quite happy with my own ranking because it fits my own beliefs, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. All right, my brother.
Good talking to you, my friend, as usual.
Absolutely. See you soon.